Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Friday, November 19th AACG Meetup. My name's Mary Childs. I'm your host today. And today our guests are artist Dafna Kaffeman and curator of the Chrysler Museum of Art, Carolyn Swan Needell. You'll enjoy this exhibition of exquisite flame-worked pieces, and they're all imbued with layers of cultural reference. I'm turning the presentation over now to Carolyn Needell, who will introduce Dafna and the exhibition. But first, before we begin, for best viewing, choose speaker view in your upper right-hand corner and put any comments and questions in the chat, and Carolyn Needell will address them to Dafna as we go along. And of course, afterwards, there'll be opportunity for conversation. All right, thank you. And Carolyn?
Thanks, Mary. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, I see some nodding. Hi, I'm Carrie Needell, the curator of glass, Carolyn and Richard Berry, curator of glass at the Chrysler Museum. And I'm really excited that we've had this fabulous exhibition of Dafna's work here. It's not here long enough. You have 1 month to come to Norfolk and see this show, though it will be moving to one other venue, the Row Green Gallery at the Cleveland, Jewish Federation of Cleveland, and that will open in May. So I'll mention that again at the end. So you will have another chance. It will look a little different from our iteration, but it'll be amazing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and just tell you basically what the show consists of and how it came together and how we came up with the show at the Chrysler, and then I'll turn it over to Dafna to actually talk more about how she makes her work, what her process is, the thoughts, the theories, the series. So that's pretty much, I'll try to keep it short and sweet on my end of things. I'm going to share my screen and hope you can all see this. If you cannot, Mary, you can stop me. So again, welcome to the Chrysler Museum of Art. You can see our little poster down the lower left corner of the show. It opened August 12th and it will run until December 12th here at the Chrysler. And I wanted to give you a little bit of a background about how the show came about. As a glass curator, I come up with 2 exhibitions of glass per year, per calendar year. And this show came about mostly because I discovered this piece, or I came across this series of Dafna's work called the Tactual Stimulation series. I'd seen images of it. I saw an example in London at a museum, and I just fell in love and thought it was the most fascinating object. And so we were lucky enough to investigate and acquire a piece for the Chrysler's permanent collection. So this is the work that we acquired in 2019. And right about that time, I thought to myself, well, I want to learn more about this artist. I'd never met her. I knew this piece and that was about it. So I investigated a little bit more, tried to figure out what she was doing now, because this piece was made in 2007. So I assumed there were lots of interesting things going on in this studio. And so learning a little bit more about what work she was doing, I thought to myself, this is someone we need to showcase in an exhibition at the Chrysler. The work is amazing, both technically, it's beautiful, and there's a lot of thought and feeling behind it. So I thought it would be a really wonderful exhibition. So we ended up with this exhibition. It's called If You Thirst for a Homeland, Flame-Worked Glass by Dafna Kaffeman. And funnily enough, when I wanted to curate something and I was reaching out to find out what kind of work was available and thinking about what kind of theme to choose to talk about Dafna's work, I found out that another American institution was also reaching out and talking about doing an exhibition of Dafna's work. And so the 2 of us were put together. And we came together and decided to co-organize. And this is the Jewish Federation of Cleveland. So we co-organized this exhibition, selected work, and this is the show that we have. So I have a lot of people to thank, because this didn't just appear out of thin air. I want to thank the Cleveland Israel Arts Connection, which is a program of the Jewish Federation of Cleveland. And then the support we got for the exhibition at the Chrysler included the Association of Israel's Decorative Arts, or IDA, and then 2 members from the Chrysler's community, Cynthia and Stuart Katz. And then we were also lucky to get support for a catalog and some programming, also supported by ADA and the Israeli Embassy to the United States. And some of our partner programming events that we're hosting in Norfolk were supported by our local Jewish Federation, the United Jewish Federation of Tidewater. So here's an image as you're walking into the gallery where the exhibition is, and our show poster. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview. We've got a lovely look to the show. It's all in one space. We have 25 artworks on view, and most of them hang on the wall. Here you can see one corner of the exhibition gallery and our introductory text. If you walk around behind that big monolith, you have a better view of the types of works on view. Again, there's 25 on view. Everything's on the wall except this case in the middle that has a horizontal display of the flame-worked glass. Around the room, it's mostly flame-worked glass on fabric with, it's really mixed media because there's embroidery or printed text, but we also decided to not just show glass or mixed media with glass artworks. We also have a series of prints, and you can see straight in the back, there's this kind of a round image, and that's actually a print. And there's a few other prints on the walls that you can't see in this image. So it was important to have other types of artwork that Dafna's been doing, because thematically it's linked, and you can see her creative process and the thoughts drifting from glass into printmaking and back and forth. So it was important to have different textures and different media to really show, you know, the artwork and what is being said. So this is sort of the overview of what you're seeing. If I zoomed into one of these works, you can see there's a fabric background, there's some embroidery, and then of course there's the flame worked glass elements itself, berries, flowers, there's pine needles, pine cones, all sorts of various elements. And they're all extremely realistic replicas, the right size, the right sharpness, thickness, colors. They're really outstanding, extraordinary works of craftsmanship with flame working. So they're just super impressive to see. I hope you'll have a chance to see them in person, because my zoomed in photos aren't actually that great compared to in person. Here's another zoomed in version of that horizontal artwork that's in the case, the display case. And I just wanted to zoom in to show that while most things are botanicals, different flowers, tree species, there are some insects as well. And this is a just miraculous praying mantis. And again, you can't, until you see it up close and personal, you see how thin the glass antenna and the various pieces of this insect are, you just cannot believe that this is made out of glass. So it's been a fun show to have at the Chrysler, because people just are really connecting with the objects on view. Here's just another view of just 3 of the artworks in the show, but I wanted to show these because it's not just about the flame worked glass. Of course, they're exquisite and really wonderful to see and miraculous, but that's not all there is. There's the text, there's the fabric, and so there's a lot more going on to these artworks than might meet the eye, which makes them especially significant to my mind. Just a shot showing some audience members who happen to be my family, looking at the works. And everyone, we've had a really fabulous response in our community, so I'm so thrilled. And then on the right-hand side of your screen, I took a pamphlet that we put together for the show that you can pick up when you're inside, and it talks a bit about Dafna, her process, and then how you sort of can read the artworks, how you can take the various elements, the fabric, the text, the flowers, and sort of pick them apart and kind of build up a story or a meaning and interpretation for yourself. So we have this lovely little pamphlet that's accompanied the show and has really helped people be able to engage further or deeper with the artworks on view. We also were very lucky to have Dafna come at the beginning of this month to the Chrysler Museum's Perry Glass Studio, and we had her for a series of days. We put her to work. She was flame working in the studio. Here you see her on the left side of your screen, working at the torch, and she did daily demonstrations. So she had audience, people watching, asking questions. Someone was narrating what she was doing, and she made a series of insects and flowers, and it was really great to actually see her at work. And then on the right, you can see her giving a tour of the exhibition to some students. Actually, we had student tours, we had membership tours, just a lot of really wonderful events while she was here, a wonderful lecture. So we're just really, really lucky and fortunate that we could have her come and do some fabulous programming. There is a catalog. We were able to put together an artist book or a catalog. You can go to the Chrysler Museum website. There's a shop and you can buy it. It's great. It's got 2 short essays, some really great pictures. It's really very much an artist book. So that was another lovely part of doing this exhibition, was being able to have that. I'll just kind of hold it up if you can see me. Yay, it's a fabulous little book. And then we have had some great programming, and our next program that's coming up is actually the Chrysler's book club. We've been able to put a book club together for various exhibitions, and the book that was chosen for the as a theme to go along with this show is called My Wild Garden. And we're going to have this book club on Sunday. It's free if anybody feels like connecting with this program. And we're actually going to have the author be involved as well. So there's been a lot of really wonderful programming and events surrounding this exhibition. I think that's it for me. I didn't want to go in, work by work to tell you about the show. I hope you'll go see things. I know Dafna is going to tell us a lot more. So let me just peek at the chat. So that pamphlet is not actually online, but you know what, it should be. We usually do. So here's this little pamphlet. It's really great. I will have our media person put a PDF up onto our website for the show page. So you can get this as well, this thing that I wrote, because I think it's actually really fun and useful. All right, I'm going to turn it to Dafna, who can share her screen, show some wonderful slides, and tell us about her background and how her process, how she got into her process, and some of the plants and the series that she's been working on and her insects. Dafna, we're excited to have you here. Take it away.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Yes, yeah.
So thank you, Carrie, and it was really wonderful to work with you on this exhibition. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about my background. So here is a photo of me in my studio. My studio is in Tel Aviv. I was born in Jerusalem, but I live in Tel Aviv and my studio is there. And as you can see, I work with the flame, and here I'm creating one of the plants. Here is an image of my studio. I'm organizing some plants, and you can see here I'm hanging. I have a wonderful wall in my studio that I use a lot. And I'm also collecting a lot of botanicals, and I'm making drawings as a process before I start to work with them with the glass. So there is a long process of, I would call it deciphering the plant, understanding how it's built, and how to take it into parts, and then how to assemble the parts together. This is my family. I have 3 children. I'm mentioning it because it takes a lot of my time as well. And this is another view of my studio. So in my life, I combine family life, my studio, and I'm also a senior lecturer at the Bezalel Academy. And here in this image, you can see the studio is completely packed because I was just preparing to ship everything and work on everything for the exhibition. Here is an image of my desk. And as you can see, I work also with text. So here you can see some letters, and I work with images and embroidery, and I do a lot of mixed media, even though glass is the main process I'm using. Here you can see a few of the images that we will later see in the exhibition. So this is a series of crowns, that some of them are now exhibited at Chrysler. And another image of my table with all the powders and the flame. It's important for me because I create botanicals and insects that they will look similar to the origin. So I try to work a lot with colors, and I mix powders, and it's a lot of it's very interesting work to try and find the right color palette for the actual botanic or insect. I'm showing an image of Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem, the old city, and this is where I grew up, very close to this area. And it affected me a lot also in my work because of the conflict that exists in Jerusalem and Jerusalem is a very beautiful and special city. I don't think there is any other like this in the world. And it's very, very important for so many people. And with all this complexity, I think it affected a lot of my work later on. These are a few samples of plants that when I grew up, I saw a lot of them in Jerusalem, the pine needle, the cyper. You will see them again coming back in the actual work. And here is another image of the museum. I was very impressed when I arrived, of course. I took a photo and asked someone to make a photo of me next to the poster. And now we will enter the exhibition. Before that, as Carrie mentioned, I was working there with the flame, doing also demonstrations, and it was really fascinating to meet a lot of people that would go to the exhibition and then come and see me work and ask questions. And you can see I was doing insects and showing them to the audience. It's a very important thing, I think, the connection to the audience. Here is an image of me at the exhibition, and here is the entrance to the exhibition. I really liked how Carrie put up the show, the use of colors in the background, the decision to create specific series together. There is also the piece in the middle, and the prints, which are also in the exhibition. And I will go now into details to a few of the series and explain a little bit about the backgrounds and how I worked on them. So here we can see a series of work titled Red Everlasting. And it's a series which I created, let's say from this exhibition, it's a more early work. I created it originally for an island in Norway to be exhibited in a lighthouse. And the work consists of embroidered handkerchiefs and glass plants on them. Here you can see on the left is one of the Red Everlasting, and on the right side is the even more earlier works. And this was the title of the whole series, Red Everlasting. It's written here in Arabic. And what I did with this series, at this point of time with my work, I've decided that I'm going to also work with the conflict of the Middle East. And there was a war, the Second Lebanese War between 2006 to 2008. And I was very interested in putting some of this feeling of this situation in the work. When I came to the island and I knew I was going to exhibit there in a lighthouse, in a small island, I thought, how can I get the people of the island involved in my work as well? And I realized that the women, most of the women there were very professional embroiders. And I've sent them in advance handkerchiefs with pencil drawing on them with text. And I've asked them to embroider however they wish. So for example, this was the title, Red Everlasting in Arabic. When they got the handkerchiefs, they didn't know the meaning of the words. And when I came there, I've combined the glass botanicals with the map. So for example, you can see here, this is a map, and it's originally taken from Haaretz newspaper, one of the articles. And here we can see, sorry that it's not a sharp image, this is taken from the article. The original article was in Hebrew. You see the translation, and you can see there was a small map of Jerusalem in the article, which I've used. And I'll go back so you can see that the handkerchief was sent in advance to the island, and it was embroidered by a little girl. And the little girl embroidered also this part where she added a heart by her own choice. And it was really fascinating for me because this is really the heart of the matter. If you know Jerusalem, the old city, is really the heart of everything that happens in Israel. So I was very astonished that she did this little heart by herself, like by her own idea. And here is another example of this work. The title is It is the plane you don't see that shuts you down in the end. It's relating to the Prime Minister then, Ehud Olmert. Again, from a newspaper, you can see here the article, the translation to English. I originally used the Hebrew article. And I've sent it to women. One of the women got it, and she decided how to embroider the text and added these little stars. And I've added these thorns to the work. And here you can see a more earlier work. This is fence line in red, and it's actually the fence line, the red fence line is actually marking the fence line that was built around Jerusalem. So this was also part of a series of little maps, and here I've added this plant. So this was sort of what I started to do, combining text or images relating to the political and social situation in the Middle East, in Israel particularly, and combining them with botanicals. This is another example, the Jerusalem sage, which is a very symbolic plant in Jerusalem. Here the embroidery is actually done by me.
Dafna, can I ask a quick question? Someone has asked about the significance of using handkerchiefs. Could you speak a little bit to if there's any significance to choosing a handkerchief? And then after, I wonder if you could also talk about how you decide what plant species to use with a particular work. So the handkerchiefs and the plant choices, we'd love to hear about that.
Okay, so about the handkerchiefs, when I started to work on this idea of combining text and plants, I was working with a specific text that was relating to a little girl who was talking about a very difficult situation and that she was crying. And the immediate reaction I had was to put the text on a handkerchief. And you know, the old handkerchief that people used to, I mean, this is a very more modern one, but there are also the ones that are very beautiful. People used to wear to hold them, and they were also very dear to them. Some would embroider on them themselves, some with wood drawing, and I found it very fascinating. I also thought about the effect of the fabric, the fact that sometimes it is, or most of the time it is white, and the relation to fabric and the way that it's holding you or that it observes your tears. This was my immediate connection, and the possibility of embroidering on it was very satisfying, I would say, because I thought also it's a very important process of work, which I like, but it also enabled me to work with other people in that way. I would give them the handkerchief and they could embroider themselves. So this was how I started with embroidery, and later on it developed. I will relate to that later. And regarding the choice of plants, so of course most of the plants that I use are very symbolic. Either that I'm attracted to them because I grew up. For example, the pine needle tree is something when I grew up in Jerusalem, I used to play a lot with it. I used to make necklaces from the pine needles, which also later came in my work. But also when you think of the pine needle, of course, there is a very strong, the people that the Zionists that settled Israel, and they started the foundation of replanting in Israel. They used a lot of the pine needle tree. So it became very, very common in the state. And the Jerusalem sage, what we see here, is of course very known like the menorah symbol. So it's a very strong symbolic plant which exists. And so most of the plants that I choose, they have a specific meaning, and I try to combine it together with the text I'm using. From here, we can go to these two works, which then, as I said, I started with the handkerchiefs to work with the text, but at a certain point, I felt that it was very limiting because of the size of the handkerchief. And then, as you can see in this work on the right side, I will go into detail more later with it, but this is already embroidered directly on the felt. And on the left side is a more newly series where the text is actually directly on the text, on the felt with another technique, so we can see it closer. On the right hand, you can see I've used here also rice paper, which I usually use to embroider on the felt, and then I take it off. Here I decided to leave it on. And the plant I'm using here is the Lantana. The Lantana is not a native plant to Israel. It was brought to Israel, and it's a very invasive plant. It's a very strong plant in terms of visuality. It has a lot of very colorful color, and it also it has a very strong scent. But it's also poisonous. It's not a healthy plant. And then I combine it here with the text that in Hebrew says, usually healthy, today was beaten. And this is taken directly from a story about the conflict between Israel and Palestine people. And here on the left side, you can see it's a part of a series of works that I did in 2017. And the title in Hebrew, you can read it. If you search for Homeland, seek shelter in its bosom, love it and live it, in its mountains and valleys, its flora and fauna. And it is taken from a book titled Homeland Plants from 1965. And at this period, I started to work also with more longer text rather than quotes. And this was one of them. I found the text to be very, very naive, but very typical to that time in Israel. And I've used letter set, which are sets of letters that you can usually put directly on the paper. When you put it on felt, it doesn't stick very well, so it becomes a little bit unsharp. And here I've used specific plants that are, some are native, well, most of them they are native to Israel. And for example, this plant is from the family of the everlasting flowers that you always have the flowers stay even when the plants die. This is also typical to the red everlasting, which was one of the former plants I've shown. Here the text says, love it and live it, again from the same quote of this book. And the barley, which is a very significant plant, one of the 7 known plants of the land, and also very important archaeologically, culturally. Here, and again, from the same text, and if you believe in your power, commune with the plants and animals you're growing, study their properties and learn to control them and bend them to your will. Everything is written in Hebrew, and the plant in the back, I've chosen to make it transparent. I usually try to make the color of the plant, but here it was very important for me to try and create a kind of a transparent plant where the red is very, very strong. It almost takes over the whole work. And here again, typical plants like the pine needles, and again, this is also a pine, from the pine needle, a little I don't know how to call it in English. Yeah.
Just like a loop, a pine needle looped together, because you make chains out of them, right? In other works?
Yeah. So here, one of the pieces, again, usually as it today, it was written. This is one of the series I've reacted to before. And you can see here the plant is completely disassembled. I've decided not to put it together. I usually make parts and then I assemble them. In this case, I felt it was really suitable for the text, the context, and everything to leave it in parts. Some close-ups and another view. And this is the central piece, which I'll talk about now. So this is a piece that should go flat. It's not hang on the wall. And you can see here a full view of the piece. The piece is accompanied by text, running text from the bottom, and also a lot of small text that is written that is on the piece itself. And for here, I actually used a copy machine. I took the text from a book, where we will see the book in just a minute. But what I did is I took the text and I just copied it in a Xerox machine, and then I cut it and I reassemble it together. And you can see on the right side, this is the plant. This is the name of the book in Hebrew. It's called the plant life in trials. It's a book for the students. It was published in 1931. And the person who published it is Margolin. He was one of the main people that started the education for botanicals in Israel. And the book, this little book, is starting with the 10 rules for work in the classroom and in the laboratory. And when I saw this text, I was fascinated by it, especially by the last phrase. So as you can see, he's talking about what the student needs to do in advance before he starts to do the little test with the plants. And he's ending it with the last order, which is when you finish your work, clean the vessel that you use, clear the table, and everything will fall into place. And I was really taken by this last sentence, everything will fall into place. Because we all want everything to fall into place. We all want everything to be okay. And it's not. And where I come from, it's definitely not. There are so many things that happen. And this was really like stuck in my mind. And then I decided to work with it. And what I did is, so you can see the whole running text is actually these 10 sentences. And I've combined here a sentence by Miri Regev. She was then the cultural minister, and she was at a rally, for Netanyahu rally, and she said, the rule of law is not above the law. And I've used the letters from the original text, I marked them in red, and this creates the sentence that she did, that she said. So. And here you can see some closed up. So for example, this says the ground or the soil. Again, you can see the little letters I cut out and I placed them. And then the circle of wasps, which then it was the first time I did it, and I found it to be very strong. The wasps are sort of in a dead position. They are not really alive, a little bit manipulated, how they are lying down. Here you can see other small sentences that I've taken from the text, like complex and simple leaves, for example, or light soil and heavy soil. And if you think about the context of this, to think about the light and heavy soil, I think it's a very strong phrase to say when you say it in the Middle East, when you talk about the soil or the land. This says the leaf. And this is about this work. And now I'm moving on to another work. This is the series of the crown, which I made especially for this exhibition. So the series actually started while there was the virus, the coronavirus. And I was home most of the time with my children. I didn't go to the studio. And when I did go to the studio, I decided I want to work with something in relating to the virus, but also with the whole atmosphere or the whole situation we were caught up with, because I thought it affected everyone, and it was quite an extraordinary situation. So on one hand, there is this crown that we were all very frightened by, this coronavirus, which looks like a little bit like a crown. And then so I've decided to work with the shape of the crown. And then on the other hand, I really wanted to work with colorful and vital flowers and plants. So as you can see, this is hanged in the Chrysler at the exhibition. I've created these crowns, and they are very colorful. And for me, they are part of a series which I continue to make. I had a funny or an interesting situation happened to me in my studio with these. This is my studio on the left side, and you can see on the top a little pigeon. Where in May there was a situation in Israel where there was a conflict and it escalated into a small war. And at this point, I was working very hard for the exhibition, but we needed to go to the shelter, and I wasn't in the studio for 2 weeks. And when I returned, I immediately felt that there was something strange in the studio, and I saw these little wasps here broken. I realized the pigeon entered the studio and started to eat them, or she tried to eat them. So it was quite strange. And you know, in Israel, the pigeon is the symbol of peace. So it was even more strange. And then eventually, of course, I could fix everything, but this was kind of an interesting experience. And then in the end, all the crowns were fixed and sent to the exhibition. Here there are a few of the series of the prints that I was very happy I could also exhibit next to the glass pieces. You can see again the round shape, which I'm working with a lot in the past years. And the insects, these are all butterflies, the images that I've created in the print, in the Jerusalem printing workshop actually. You can see a close-up of this. And this is a very large print which is in the center of the exhibition. And what it has actually is the aerial roots of the ficus tree, which is a native Indian tree, and it was brought to Israel. And what I did, I created this with glass. Then I made photos and images of it. At the printing workshop, we created this image from the original glass shapes. And as you can see here, I will just relate shortly to another exhibition I'm having. And here I have the actual glass aerial roots. So when I was invited to do the Chrysler exhibition, I was also invited to do an exhibition, a solo exhibition at the Tactual Museum in Israel. And I did it, and strangely enough, they opened on the same day, which I thought was very unique. But there is a lot of very interesting connection between the two exhibitions. So one of them is, for example, this large aerial roots created from glass in comparison to this large print of it at the Chrysler, which I thought was fascinating. And then I will show just a few more images from the exhibition there, because I think it's interesting to see the work there is actually hanged directly on the wall without any cover. And it's a large installation that spreads along the wall. You can see again the images of the crown, the lantana, the plant, etc. Here is me again putting up in my studio first the aerial root circle, and some more images from the exhibition in Israel. And this is the piece that started the whole thing, so I thought I will end with that. If there are any questions about
Yeah, Dafna, there's a question. Can you go back a slide to the shot that maybe the install shot? Yes, there. A question's come up about text, because in the Chrysler exhibition, many of the works are incorporated with text, and it's very important. And can you talk a little bit about this exhibition in Israel right now, where the text is? Because I can see the strip, but can you explain where it is and what the words are for everybody here?
Yes, so actually in this exhibition there are two lines of text. You can see one line here, and then the second one is here. And so one text is actually the same text that I've used for the large piece at the Chrysler Museum, which is the 10 notes about how to work at the botanical, I will just quote it: the rules for work at the classroom and in the laboratory from the Plant Life in Experiments from the 1931 manual, which we talked about. And then the second script is a completely different script. It is taken from I will just read it out from the catalog, so it would be probably best. So it is taken from excerpts from the incitement field against Lido Mark, which is actually the son of Likud party member Osnat Mark, in May 2021. I took his text. The text is actually a very violent one, and it's a very kind of rude one. I can quote a few of the beginnings as saying something like, what are you doing? Are you a moron? Be polite. So he was talking like that to a police officer, and then he was accused about it. So they had the whole script written in the newspaper. That's how I could get it. And I chose to take it and work with it because I saw the gap that exists between the last rule of how placing everything together in the study room will, if you do everything right and everything will come to order on one hand, and then on the other hand, this very violent, brutal text. And I saw this is actually the gap between these two texts is actually the gap where we are living in. This is where I live in. And it's reflecting about the situation here. So this is in regards to the choice of the text here. But you can see it's very subtle. It's not very, very strong. You really need to lean to see it, and you really need to read and understand the context to understand it, which is part of what I do usually.
Dafna, there's another question about nature, the theme of nature in your work. And the question is, would you think you'll continue to work primarily with themes of nature, or do you have other concepts you think you might move into?
Well, first of all, I would say my main concept is the text. I usually start with the text. So wherever the text takes me, that's where I'm going. Either if it's quotes from the newspaper or it's books, etc. And it all relates to the cultural and social and political situation where I am now. And the nature is a theme that I think is endless, and I'll probably continue working with it, but it's taking different shapes. I mean, for example, in this exhibition, you can see on the bottom, for example, these straws that are just leaning on the wall. I think they took completely different shape from something like the crown of the Lantana, which is very specific. So I think it's evolving all the time, but definitely the nature is a very strong theme for me, which I will probably continue to work with. I think it's endless, and I think it's also very, very important to deal with it now because of the ecological changes. In a way, I think it reflects also about a lot of what is happening now with how plants, insects, how the ecological system is changing. So I feel that there is still a lot to do with that, and I probably will continue.
I think that would be amazing. I think you're right. There's a lot going on with the change in the world, and so it's just a lot of food for thought, the nature and natural topics. There was a question. I wanted to try to link the works that we're seeing here back to some of your earlier work. The piece that the Chrysler purchased is part of a series, the Tactual Stimulation series. Yeah, and I know there's others out there. And one question came up was, are there others? Do you continue to make these? So I think that's one half. Do you still continue to make this type of series? And then the other half of the question would be, from my perspective, is how those two link, this series with your current series. If you could link those a little bit.
Yes, so to start with, I do make these specific pieces still, but I make them only on commission. I don't make them regularly. And there was a period that I did make more of them. When I started, I had an exhibition at Helen Gallery, and then after that I started to make more of these pieces. And at a certain point, I mean, I really love these pieces. They are really beautiful, and they are coming directly, I think, from the heart. And when you view them, you get an immediate reaction to them. And they also connect to the Wolf series. I don't have an image here, but you know my work, so then the Wolf is a very significant work that I've done. And then at a certain point when I was returning to Israel, I felt like I really needed to work more with what is happening what is happening in Israel. And then I started to work on the botanicals and the text. So in a way, it was a complete different type of work. But on the other hand, after that, many people told me that they see a flower in this piece as well. The wolves are also coming from the natural world. So I don't know if they are so very far away from each other, but I would say for me, I do continue to make them. And I find them also to be very interesting in comparison to the other work I'm making. The botanical work is much more, you have to think about it. It's more, sometimes the plants are very emotional. You can react to them very emotionally, but if you want to read and understand, then you usually need to think about it. Here, in this type of work, it's a very strong effect. Either you like it or not, but it's a strong effect that you get immediately. It's like a catharsis in a way. So I like to combine the two in exhibitions with these two different bodies of work.
We'd love to have more questions as you think about what you'd love to ask Dafna. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about your training, because I know you did, you know, other things. You weren't just glass initially, and then you went to Amsterdam. So if you could, can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into glass and how you found flame working?
Yes, so I started actually in Jerusalem at the ceramic and glass department, but it wasn't a glass department then. There was only one class with glass, and the only glass we used was the window glass, so everything was green also. And you know that Israel has this very, very significant ancient glass history. But in terms of contemporary glass at the 1990s, when I studied, there wasn't much to see. And I felt I really need to work with glass, but I wanted to be more conceptual, to be more connected to the art, contemporary art world. So I've decided that I need to go somewhere, and the option of Amsterdam was very good, I thought then, because there was a small community there with artists like Richard Meitner and Mika Holt and other artists, and even Tinsky was then there. So I moved there, and I feel that it really helped me develop the work to, on one hand, a more conceptual aspect, but then I also met the flame working technique there, and that's before that I tried many other techniques, but the flame working enabled me really to feel like I'm touching the material. I mean, you can't really touch glass, and that was really frustrating for me. So I've tried to see in any way how I can touch it. And the flame working, because it's very small scale and it's very intimate, you don't need anyone else in the studio, I felt that it's the closest to touching the actual glass. And I felt very connected to the technique immediately, and I left to Venice to study there in a night school. And after that night school, where I did for a few months, 2 evenings every week, and studied all these little Venetian swans and clowns and all these little things that they teach you, I started to work on my own type of work, and I've actually ended up at Wheaton Village, where they have the glass center and the residency. And from there on, I just continued working with the flame and develop it, learn myself how to do it. That's it, I guess.
Dafna, I have a question. Is there a large glassworking community in your area?
Yes, I think now in Israel we have a large community. We actually have even a few hot shops that are active. There is one at Betzalel, and then there is one in Caesarea, and there are, I think, 2 more, either in the center or either 3 more even in the center and in the north. So there is a larger community, and many people went out and came back and continue. And we have a very interesting program at Betzalel also, which also contributes to having more and more students. Then there was the design biennale at the Haaretz Museum last year, so there was a lot of work from glass. Yeah, I think there is a community, and it's a very nice community.
Thank you. Let's see, Howard is asking, do you teach anywhere? And are there other flame workers that you regularly talk to?
I teach at the Bezalel Academy for Art and Design at the Glass and Ceramic department. I'm teaching there, and we have a few more flame workers in Israel. Many people that do beads, actually. There are a lot of people that do beads. So we have communication. I wouldn't say I particularly talk with flame worker as I particularly talk with artists. So it can be even artists from different medias, and I try to have my own community of people that I relate to and I can talk with, because that's very important for an artist to have someone to relate to in the art world and communicate.
Are there many opportunities for you to work or teach in the US? I mean, I know that during COVID that was a problem, but do you think that will open up again?
I think it starts to open up. For example, the show in Cleveland, we are going to do some work with the Cleveland Art Institute. I'm going to teach there, and that's in September. And I really I love teaching. So in the past, I did teach. I taught in Japan at the University of Arts, and I taught actually also in Indiana at the Ball State University, and in Boston, and in Corning. And I'm always open to teaching. I think you learn a lot from teaching, actually. And the connection with students, actually, I could also feel it at the Chrysler when I came to work, because there are a lot of students that they have a wonderful program there for students and assistants. And I felt it's a very important thing to be connected to people who are still students, and they are very open in their minds, and it's very stimulating and interesting, and I love it. I love teaching.
We have one more question. Can you talk about your work at the Jerusalem Print Workshop? And also, do you do drawings before you work in glass?
So yes, I do drawings a lot before I do them, before I start working with the glass. It's a very important part of the process. And I started working at the Jerusalem Printing Workshop already. It was, I think, about 8 years ago almost. I started there because I was invited to work there as an artist. They have a program that they invite artists and they connect them with master printers. And I started and I continued working there for a few years. It's a wonderful place, and it really opened up, I think, my work to other possibilities. Working with 2 dimensions, working with the possibility of the print. There is something also very similar in the way that the printer is thinking, as well as a craftsman thinker and glass maker and etc., or metal maker, because the process is very important. And the process with printing allows you to make either a few layers of shape, or to take one shape and repeat it again and again. And this repetition is occurring to me a lot in my work with glass. I always end up making series. I hardly ever make just one piece. I always make series. And the repeating of the shape and repeating of the image is a very important thing for me, because I can explore it more and I can try another thing with it, and I can discuss something much more deeper when I have a series of items that you can look through them, and then there starts to be a language that's happening between those images, and then you can get into a much deeper thought about the work and the process and etc. So I thought the connection to the printing was really incredible, and I'm really happy I had this possibility, and also the possibility to show it together. And as Carrie mentioned, I can show it. We've created a catalog, and the catalog is actually joined for both exhibition. I can show a little bit just from the catalog how it is built, but you can see also a few more prints and the images from the show at the Chrysler, and I think it's quite interesting, and it's also discussing a little bit the process of the printing. all the images from the printing, the images of glass, and just, yeah, you can see that a few of the text. So I think it's a very interesting, it's a bilingual catalog, Hebrew and English. So I can just scroll down while you want to ask anything else.
Well, thank you. That was fascinating. And Carrie, do you have some final words about the museum or the exhibition?
I guess my final words are that I wish you could come to the Chrysler to see it in person, because to see the work in person is just to be awed. In pictures, it's nice, but in person, it's even better. The show's here till December 12th. If you can come, that'd be amazing. I'll be happy to take anyone through. But before it leaves the United States and goes back to Berlin and Israel, it will go to Cleveland. So again, from May to December, they're lucky they have a longer window than I had here. So you do have another chance to see the works in person at Cleveland. So please see the works, they're amazing. And I'm just so thrilled that we had this opportunity and it worked out, and we had great partners and sponsors that made this happen to get the work, because it all came from Israel and Germany and was not here. So I'm so thrilled that we were able to share this with our audience, near and far. Thank you, Dafna, so much for being involved. And thank you, AACG, for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dafna. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, the Chrysler Museum. Before we go, we also want to say that there will be no meetup next week because of the Thanksgiving holiday, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone. We will be returning the following Friday, November 3rd. Again, Dafna, Carrie, thank you so much. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone. We look forward
Wait, that's December 3rd. Next
December
one
3rd.
is December 3rd.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hanukkah also, which is